Quote stage. Congratulations. You have now worked collaboratively with your builder. You've identified all your must-have requirements, you've received all the planning approvals you need, you have a set of detailed drawings and structural calculations, and you've passed all this information over to your builder. You may have had to discuss various different elements of what your requirements are and what they could mean. There could be specialist items in there and so on and so forth. But you have done all of this work in collaboration with your builder, and everybody knows now what is really required to build this project. Is this process going to take a long time? And if so, why? The answer is this usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the size of the project you want us to build. So the quote has to reflect the detail, and the devil is always in the detail. At Heart Developments, every single project we do and every quote that we provide is bespoke and unique. Even if your next door neighbour has had exactly the same extension that you want, it will not be a carbon copy of what you end up with. Your style, your design may be completely different on the inside. Even slight differences on the outside can make a difference to the final number we present you with. We never apply a one-size-fits-all approach, but we do have a standard process that we operate to get you to that quote. The first thing we do is produce a high-level plan. And to get to that plan, we ask ourselves 3 questions. Question number 1, what are the key tasks that need to be completed against each area for this project? Number 2, what's the most efficient way of using our labour against each of these tasks? Because it could be that we can use a couple of teams in parallel and therefore reduce the cost for you. Number 3, how long will each task take and what are the dependencies of those tasks? For example, if we have one type of trade working in an area, working on one task, what needs to be completed in order for he or she to be able to complete that work? Once this is complete, we now have a guide to work to. So the next thing we do is identify our materials. Sometimes you may hear this referred to as quants. We identify what type of material we need for each task and how much of that we need. We identify any specialist materials required. If we don't have a relationship with a specialist material provider, we now establish that relationship. We then look at risks. What are the risks associated with this project? Apart from risks that we may have already identified, there are generic risks. The 2 generic risks we have in all of our projects are the weather. In the UK, we cannot rely on the weather. We must look at what we assume to be the case for the weather for the different seasons of the year. For example, if we plan to start a build project during the winter months, the risk is that it may simply be too cold to build. The bricks may be too cold, the cement may not set, and so on and so forth. And we would highlight this risk on our quote to you. We would recommend potentially that we start at a different time to mitigate this risk, or we would ask you to accept this risk. The second risk is resource availability. We cannot assume that everybody we've assigned to the project will be available at all of the times we've assigned them to. Somebody may be sick. There may be other reasons that somebody just cannot be on site at that time. And so our job is to make sure that we have enough resources in the resource bank to mitigate this risk and to keep the project to time. Assumptions. Do we assume there will be no problems in the areas of electrics or plumbing or construction, and that all feeds will be available and ready? Or do we mitigate this risk by having EICR conducted, detailed surveys before the quotes provisioned, etc., etc.? Is there anything more that we require from the client, but at this point in time the client is not yet ready to share that information? It could be something simple like a particular bathroom design that you want, and right now you haven't had time to provide those links. So your quote may have a provisional sum based on a basic finish, and there will be an assumption documented in the quote or a qualification documented in the quote to say the client is going to send us that detailed information at a later point in time. It won't affect the project timeline. We have time to get to that. We also cover what the health and safety requirements will be. We understand the nature of your family. You may have small children in the home for the duration of the project. You may have children that actually are going to be at home. Although they're at school most of the year, we are building during a summer half term or one of the other breaks during the year, and we need to take those factors into consideration. We also look at waste management. How many skips will we need for this project? Can we have skips on this project site? There may be no room, and we may have to have an alternative way of disposing of waste. We look at the plant required and any other items for consideration. Exclusions. Very important. What won't we be doing? What have we assumed is excluded from the quote at this stage? Again, this is all documented for you. This is your chance when you receive the quote to say, I don't want that excluded, or I don't agree with some of these points. This is the beginning of the process. In summary, all of this work is pulled together to provide you with an overall timeline, an overall fixed cost, and a payment schedule to match. In parallel to us producing this information, we are looking at the budget that you have shared with us. We are looking at how far we are through this process. For example, if we're only halfway through this quote, but we've already hit your budget, we would stop. We would have a conversation with you, and we would discuss the scope of the project. It may be that we can't help you at this time. And although disappointing for us both, it's better to stop than to continue with something when we know your expectation is, and we know that you're going to be disappointed. So, communication is key. Stopping, discussing, further collaboration is key. We want to get you there. We want to be able to build this project for you. But we need you to be comfortable with the what, the why, the how, the will, the won't, etc. So although this might feel like it takes a long time, it's worth the wait. The last thing we want is to provide you with a quote which you can't understand. You don't know how we've come to this figure. Now you do.